I was on a chartered flight to see my son Daniel. Leather seat, oval window, a glass of water I didn't touch. And I realized I had nothing urgent waiting on the other end. No deal, no call, no one needing me. I sat there for 6 hours and didn't know what to do with myself. That had never happened, not once in 30 years. I landed and told Barbara. She said, "Welcome to what I've been doing while you were gone." I thought retirement would feel like freedom. For 8 months, it felt like being a ghost in my own life. That's the one thing I wish I knew. My name is Alan Rosen. I'm 68. I built what I called the business from nothing, starting over broke at 31. I operated on handshakes and phone calls, moving things between people who had them and people who needed them. I built it so it would run without me. That was the whole point. And then, on the first Monday I had nowhere to be, I sat in my home study at 10 in the morning with nothing urgent. The silence of a phone that wasn't going to ring. I built an entire life around being needed, and then I made sure I wasn't needed anymore. The joke, it turned out, was on me. I'd spent 30 years running toward a finish line I'd painted myself, and when I crossed it, I just stood there, wondering what the point of the race was. That's the personal setup nobody gives you. You think the money is the goal. You think the freedom is the prize. And both of those things are true in a way. But they're not the whole truth. The whole truth is you don't retire from something. You have to retire to something. And I had no idea what my to was. I filled time. Long, aimless walks around the community here in Florida. I'd try to read a novel and get 3 pages in before I'd check a dead email inbox. Barbara found me one afternoon, reorganizing the garage for the 3rd time. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me. That was worse. I was so good at building a machine that I forgot to build a life that could run without it. The hustle was my identity. When it slowed down, so did something inside me. I didn't see that coming. Nobody tells you that part. Then there are the people who knew you when. They become a mirror you might not want to look into. I had lunch with an old mentor from the community, one of the men who taught me things you don't find in books. He's in his 80s now. He leaned in like he always did and asked, "So Alan, what's moving?" There was an awkward pause. I had no answer. I had nothing moving. I had a calendar with blank spaces. I saw the flicker in his eyes, not disappointment, but a kind of gentle confusion. My own son, Daniel, out on the West Coast in tech, had a similar polite confusion when I tried to explain my sudden free time on one of our weekly calls. I realized my identity was so wrapped up in being the guy who could get things done that without the things, I wasn't sure who the guy was. And the money. Look, the money gives you options. It does. We're fine. We don't think about the grocery bill. I can fly private, have a home here and another property up north. But it doesn't give you a purpose, and that's a much more expensive problem. I flew up north once just to have a destination, just to be going somewhere. I sat on the dock there for an entire afternoon, staring at the same water. I realized I could buy almost anything I wanted, except a good reason to get out of bed on a Tuesday. I spent my life thinking money was the scoreboard. In retirement, you find out the game has changed, and they've taken the board down. Barbara watched all this. She's quieter than me, but she sees more. She let me sit in it for a while. And then, one evening, she said something that's become my compass. She said, "You spent 30 years building something to leave. Maybe figure out what you're building now." I didn't have an answer. I still don't have a complete one, but it started me thinking. This channel, talking to you, is part of that. It's me trying to connect again, but in a different way. Not a deal, but a thought. Not a transaction, but maybe a little understanding. Last week, I watched my grandson Eli's baseball game. 10 years old, named partly for my father. And for the first time in a long time, I was just present. I wasn't thinking about a call I had to make. I wasn't mentally running numbers. I was just watching a kid swing a bat and miss and then swing again. It felt like a different kind of building, slower, quieter. So the one thing I wish I knew, you need to start building what comes next long before you walk away from what you have. Don't just plan your exit. Plan your entrance into whatever is on the other side. It doesn't have to be big. It can be a hobby, a project, time with a grandchild where you're actually in the room. But you have to lay the foundation while you're still in the old house, or you'll step out into empty land. If any of this sounds familiar, if you're there, or you're getting close, or you're watching someone go through it, tell me where you are with it in the comments. Barbara and I read them. Honestly, they help us figure this out too. Thanks for your time. Like a ghost in your own life? I did, for about 8 months. Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Rosen. I'm 68 years old, and I want to talk about the one thing I wish I'd understood before I walked away from my business. I thought retirement would feel like freedom. In theory, it did. But in practice, for those first 8 months, it felt like I was haunting my own house. The silence was the worst part. I remember the first Monday, 10 a.m., sitting right here in this study. The phone wasn't going to ring. I had no office to call, no deal waiting. No one needed me for anything urgent. I'd built my entire life around being needed, the guy who could get things done, who could move things, who could connect people. And then I spent years carefully, intentionally, building a structure that didn't need me anymore. The joke, it turns out, was on me. I'd engineered my own obsolescence. And let me tell you, that's a strange thing to realize about yourself at 10 a.m. on a Monday with a perfectly quiet phone. The moment it really crystallized for me wasn't in this chair, though. It was at 30,000 feet. I was on a chartered flight, heading out to the West Coast to see my son, Daniel. This was about 6 months in. I'm in a leather seat, you know the kind, oval window. I had a glass of water on the tray table that I didn't touch for 3 hours. I just sat there, and I realized I had nothing waiting for me on the other end. No pressure, no call to make, no problem to solve, just empty hours. The flight attendant came by, a woman about my daughter's age. She looked at me, at the full glass of water, and she said, "Everything all right, sir?" And I said, "Yes, of course," but I wasn't. I'd spent 30 years running toward a finish line I'd painted myself, and when I finally crossed it, I just stood there. I landed, got to Daniel's place, and I called Barbara. I told her about the flight, about the feeling, and she was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Welcome to what I've been doing while you were gone." Just like that. No malice in it, just a fact. And I've thought about that sentence every day since. I'd been so busy racing, I never stopped to ask what I was supposed to do after the race. So I came home. And that's when the real work started, though I didn't know it was work at the time. It just looked like me wandering around my own life, trying to figure out where I'd left myself. So I came home. And that's when the real work started, though I didn't know it was work at the time. It just looked like me wandering around my own life, trying to figure out where I'd left myself. I'd fill the days, long, aimless walks around the community. I tried to read a novel. Barbara's always on me to read more. And I'd get 3 pages in before I'd check my email, an inbox that was completely dead. I found myself in the garage, reorganizing tools for the 3rd time in a month. Barbara came out, leaned against the door frame, and just watched me for a minute. She didn't have to say anything. I was so good at building a machine that could run without me, I'd forgotten to build a life that could. Then I had lunch with an old mentor from the community, a man who taught me more about a handshake than any contract. We're at the deli and he leans in, same as always, and says, "So Alan, what's moving?" And I just paused. That awkward, heavy silence. I had no answer. My identity was so wrapped up in being the guy who could get things done that without the things, I wasn't sure who the guy was. He saw it. He just nodded, patted my hand, and changed the subject. It was a kindness. That's when I understood the money just gives you a different set of problems. I flew up north to the other property just to have a destination. I sat on the dock there for an entire afternoon, staring at the same patch of water. I could buy almost anything in that moment, except a good reason to get out of bed on a Tuesday. I spent my life thinking money was the scoreboard. In retirement, you find out the game has changed, and they've taken the board down. That dock was the bottom. And just like being broke at 31, the only useful question left was, okay, now what? The problem was, I didn't know how to answer that question anymore. Now what? Had always been about the next deal, the next connection, the next move. This was different. This was about the next hour, the next day. I started noticing small things. The way Barbara would glance at me over her book when I'd pace from the kitchen to the study and back again. The careful tone my daughter Rachel used when she'd ask, "So what did you get up to today, Dad?" As if I were recovering from an illness. I tried filling the calendar, lunch with people from the old days, but the conversations would inevitably turn to business, to what was happening now, and I'd feel myself receding, becoming a relic. I was a chapter in their story that was finished. I'd drive home from those lunches with a hollow feeling, the taste of expensive coffee gone sour in my mouth. I was living in the aftermath of my own life. One afternoon, I picked up my grandson Eli from school. He's 10. In the car, he was talking a mile a minute about some project, and I realized I was only half listening. My mind was back in some boardroom from 2004, a negotiation I'd won. I shook my head physically and forced myself back to the car, to his voice. "Sorry, Eli," I said, "what was that last part?" He repeated it patiently, but the moment was broken. I'd missed it. That's when it hit me. I was so used to my attention being a commodity, something to be split and sold to the highest bidder, that I didn't know how to just give it away. To a 10-year-old, in a car, for free. I told Barbara about it that night. We were on the terrace, the Florida sky turning that slow, pinkish orange. "I missed the moment with Eli," I said. She didn't offer a solution. She just said, "You noticed you missed it. That's the start." It was a small grace. She'd seen me rebuild a business from nothing. Now she was watching me try to rebuild a man from the pieces of one. It was slower work. There were no blueprints. The channel was her idea, though she'd never claim it. "You talk to me," she'd said one evening. "You talk a lot. Some of it's even useful. Maybe talk to a camera instead. Get it out of your head." I resisted. It felt like performing. But then I thought about that silence in the study and the silence in my own head that was so much louder. Maybe talking was the now what? Not to teach, but to figure out, to connect the pieces of my own experience, even if the only person it helped was me. The first time I hit record, my hands were cold. I stared into the lens and saw a stranger, a retired man. It took a dozen tries before I could say, "My name is Alan Rosen," without feeling like I was introducing a ghost. So I started trying to answer that question. Now what? And Barbara, she watched me fumble with it. One night we're on the terrace and she says it plain. "You spent 30 years building something to leave. Maybe figure out what you're building now." I didn't have an answer. I still don't have a complete one, but I'm working on it. This channel, that's part of it. A small part. It's me trying to connect the pieces of my own experience out loud to see if they make a different kind of sense. But the real shift, it wasn't some grand plan. It was last Thursday. My grandson Eli had a baseball game. I was there in a folding chair. And for the first inning, my mind was somewhere else, back in some meeting, some deal. And then Eli was up at bat. He's 10, all elbows and concentration. And I watched him, just watched him, the way he planted his feet, the way he swung and missed completely, and the look on his face, not defeat, just calculation. And I was there. Not just my body in the chair, I was there. My attention wasn't a commodity to be split anymore. It was just a thing I could give, to him, for free. And it hit me right then. This is the thing they don't tell you. You spend your life building something outside yourself, a business, a reputation, a number in an account, so you don't have to look at what's inside. And then you retire, and the outside thing is done, and you're left standing there with just you. And if you haven't been tending to that, it's a pretty quiet place. The money, the properties, the flights, they're just scenery. They don't fill the quiet. Only the things you give your real, undivided attention to can do that. A 10-year-old swing. The way Barbara looks at me over her coffee when she knows I'm getting it. The one thing I wish I knew, you're not building a retirement fund. You're building a man who can live in the retirement. And I started that build about 30 years too late. But I'm here now, on a folding chair, watching a kid miss a ball. And it's the most present I've felt in a decade. So that's where I am. The one thing I wish I knew, it's that you're not building a retirement fund. You're building a man who can live in the retirement. And I started that build about 30 years too late. But I'm here now, trying to figure it out, one folding chair moment at a time. Look, I don't have a system for you. I don't have a course. I just have this, my own experience, which is a mix of being very wrong and occasionally, slowly, getting something right. If any of what I've said today landed for you, if it sounded familiar, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps more than you'd think. Lets me know I'm not just talking to myself here. And I'd really like to hear from you. Leave a comment. Tell me, where are you in all this? Are you in the ghost in the study phase like I was? Are you on the dock staring at the water? Or have you found a piece of your now what? Barbara and I read every single one. Honestly, your stories help us figure this out too. This isn't a one-way street. If you want to follow along as we sort through it, the good, the awkward, the quiet realizations, then subscribe. I put out a new video every week. We'll keep talking about the stuff nobody tells you. All right, thanks for your time.